What do you like? Tell me what you like.
I love the idea of nourishing both our body and our soul.
Welcome to the Nourishing You Podcast presented by the National Association of Nutrition Professionals, NANP. We invite you to join Kristen Burkett and Diana Wally as they host experts from the holistic wellness space who will share practical tips and information to enhance your health and vitality. Kristen and Diana are master nutrition therapists and board certified in holistic nutrition with private practices that support their clients as they strive to reach their full potential. If you enjoy today's show, please help us out by commenting below, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel to help us spread the word.
You have to move your body. That's my message. That's my passion.
This podcast is brought to you in part by American College of Healthcare Sciences and My Wellness Collaborative.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Nourishing You Podcast. We're so fortunate to have Dr. Allan Bacon here today. I can't wait to dive in. Dr. Allan holds a doctorate in dental surgery from the University of Maryland. He's a certified personal trainer through the National Academy of Sports Medicine, a certified physique and bodybuilding coach, a certified nutritionist ×2, a certified coach for USA Powerlifting, and has formulated professionally for industry-leading dietary supplement companies since 2009. You can find his published fitness articles in outlets such as Muscle and Fitness, SciFit, the Alan Aragon Research Review, the Personal Trainer Development Center, and more. Welcome, Dr. Allan.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the invite. This is one of my favorite things to do, to be able to get out to general public, get some information out there. And so I love coming on these things.
You are really good at it. So we are really excited to introduce you to our audience. And you have such an interesting background. So I know me personally and our audience, we're dying to find out how an oral surgeon pivoted to nutrition and personal training. So start us off with a recap of your story and how you became a health and fitness expert.
So the story is, it's going to sound a little bit sad at first, but I think that it has ended up in a very good place for me. I've always had a big interest in fitness and nutrition. I started lifting when I was 17 years old. It became a passion for me. Even throughout dental school and everything like that, it was something that was always a pivotal part of my life. Fast forward a few years, I've been practicing about 10 years. And my father, who had been a dentist for 35 years, ended up getting throat cancer. It ultimately took his life. And one of the conversations that I had with him at the end was, if you were able to do this over again, what would you do differently? And he said that he would make more time for his family and he would make more time to chase his passions. And at the same time, December 24th, Christmas Eve dinner, supposed to be spending time with my wife and in-laws, and I was doing emergency surgery. And so those two things hit back to back, and it made me take pause and reevaluate my situation. And I turned to my wife, and my wife is a lifter of no small renown. She was an Olympic weightlifter. She placed silver in Worlds in 2019. So she was very accomplished in the realm too. And I turned to her and I said, hey, I'm thinking about starting up a fitness and nutrition coaching company. We do this for our friends anyways on the side. Why don't we do this, make a little bit of money, have some fun doing it? And she was like, yeah, let's go all in. And so we founded Maui Athletics, our company that does the fitness and nutrition coaching. And after a couple years, I was lucky enough to have it take off and be able to support a lifestyle. And so I initially got into it because it was a passion piece. And with the issues that I had with my father, you're going to have a genetic predisposition to a host of potential problems, cancer being one of them. The actions, the habits, the routines that we have in daily life can make a big difference on whether you display that genetic tendency or not. And growing up, seeing my father work himself to death, his nutrition was atrocious. He never exercised. He was one of those go, 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 I'll rest when I'm retired type of people. And I thought about it. And one of the things that struck me was maybe I can make some changes in people's lives before they start to have these health problems and prevent their families and them from going through the same things that I went through. And so, you never know how much of a difference that you make in people's lives, but I can say that seeing people get on the right path, both mentally, emotionally, physically, with their health and their nutrition has been extremely rewarding. And hopefully along the way, we prevent some of those diseases that could have otherwise been very problematic in their lives. So it has been a very big thing in my life because it affected me so much. And because I think that with the way that we can set up nutrition, exercise, prioritizing those before health becomes an issue, we can really make a huge difference in people's lives.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. And sorry about your father.
Well, that's what I was saying. This is one of those things that it's going to sound like a really down point when we talk about it, but it was the kick in the pants that I needed to make that change.
If we can take something positive from something negative that happens in our lives, that's a real blessing. That's what makes challenges and difficult things meaningful. So I'm grateful that you found that for your own life, and now you're sharing that with others and with us here today. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're in a moment where weight loss is a huge topic, especially GLP-1 medications in the spotlight. There's so much pressure not only to lose weight, but to do it quickly and easily.
Mm-hmm.
And these are things that don't really add up with sustainable weight loss. It seems like a lot of the basics about weight management have been put aside. So we wanted to take some time with you today to revisit these basics and bring them back into focus. So beyond medications, can you start us off by talking about some of your favorite timeless key nutrition principles that people need to know to lose weight, hopefully fat instead of muscle, and in a healthy, sustainable way?
First, we have to understand really how the body works. And I think that this can be a challenging thing for people because the scientific answer and the experience of losing body fat, having this become sustainable, are very different things. So at its core, your body guides weight change based on energy balance. The amount of calories that you pull in, the amount of calories that you burn through daily activities, through your resting metabolic rate, all of these things add in. If you're pulling in more calories through food than what you're burning, you're going to gain weight, and vice versa. If you're pulling in less than you're burning more, you will lose weight. This is one of those immutable laws. Now, this is a difficult thing for people to essentially accept because they'll say, what about cortisol, or what about insulin, or what about all of these other factors that add in my thyroid health, all of these different things. None of those things disprove energy balance. In fact, they tie in perfectly to it. And so if we are on a journey to lose body fat in a sustainable way, one of the things that you said was really important, doing it in a manner that we're able to consistently do over time. And typically that is not a crash diet. And so trying to see the scale drop as quickly as possible is oftentimes our own worst enemy. It feels really good in the beginning because the scale is changing, but it becomes quickly unsustainable. So if we know that we need to do this in a sustainable way, we can make moves to make this a part of our lives and actually start to focus on the habits and routines that can bring us to success. And so if we know that energy balance is the main driver, we can stop looking at some of these other things that really pull our focus away from what actually works. And unfortunately, with the way that social media works, we're getting a lot of noise in the space. And we need to micromanage our cortisol. We need to micromanage our insulin. We need to do all of these different things when in reality, the basics tend to work for everybody if you just focus on moving a little bit more and eating a little bit less. I know that's very reductionist, but that's what it is. It's just not as actionable as we would hope. And so actionable things to be able to do this and also sustain health in the best way possible. Building diets around whole, minimally processed foods, incorporating habit work like eating slowly, focusing on proteins, making sure that we're getting adequate amounts of fiber through foods in our diet. All of these things allow us to get the satiety that we're looking for, the micronutrients, the health, and push ourselves towards what we're trying to achieve physically from an aesthetic standpoint. So there's a lot to essentially cover in this area, but I think that one of the things that can really help people is realizing that genetics don't doom you. This is something that a lot of people worry about. My family was fat. I had obesity. I've always had obesity in my life. Genetics itself is usually not the problem. Having some severe pathology can be a little bit of a complicating factor. And certainly if you have things like a hypothyroid issue or a metabolic issue, like a cardiometabolic problem, get with a doctor and be seen and have that treated. Once that is stable and under control, it's great to know that genetics do not doom you. There is a variance in resting metabolic rate between people. It's not necessarily as big as you think. It's usually anywhere between 100 and maybe 500 calories per day. Now, the good news is, if we look at the research that looks at the genetic influence versus environmental influences on fat loss, the genetic influence is almost non-existent, because environment, our learned habits, really drive a lot of the way that we eat and interact with food on a daily basis. And emotional eating is one of those things that is a very challenging point for people to face. There was a study by Hurl, 2018. They looked at twins. So you had groups of people who had the exact same genetics. They looked at these twins over lifespans, and they found that nearly all of their response to emotions, cravings, managing eating was a learned response. That's the great part that you can take away from that. If it is a learned response, you can unlearn it. You can learn new habits, new routines. You have a lot of power over the situation. I know that we feel powerless a lot of the time, but it's good to know that if we have this control in our life, we can look for different ways to take control, to give us the ability to lose body fat, become healthier, live longer, and essentially thrive in life. And so the first place that I usually like to point people towards when they're starting to understand these things, if they're struggling with things like snacking, cravings, emotional eating, the way that they deal with stress, is to identify, are you dealing with emotional or physical hunger? They're two different things. Emotional or hedonic hunger tends to come on suddenly. It tends to be mindless. It tends to not be satiating. Whereas a physical hunger comes with, it goes away with eating. It tends to have hunger pangs. It tends to be located in the stomach rather than located in the mind, where you're trying to find different textures and tastes and experiences. And so this can be a very powerful thing for people that are attempting to live a better life and realize whether or not this hunger is a physical or emotional thing. Because this is something that everybody is going to be dealing with when we're trying to lose body fat. And we talk about what are the main things that we start to look towards. Really understanding what we're experiencing is a very important thing.
I think that is such a key point. And what I find with my own clients is something they really want to just skip over and not really pay attention to and understand. But learning to recognize your cues as to why you want to eat, what's driving that, is really fundamental. And I think you really hit on something there that I hope our listeners will take to heart, because I feel like it's one of the biggest pieces. And for people that have been yo-yo dieting for a long time, or going back and forth and consistently trying to lose the weight that they continue to regain, I think it is a very big piece of the puzzle.
Cravings are a very difficult thing to deal with. And this is probably one of the main reasons why people have that issue with being on the diet roller coaster in year out. As you lose weight, your body goes through a process called metabolic adaptation. Metabolic adaptation is all the downregulation of hormones, metabolic rates, all those different types of things that people say, oh man, I've been eating 1,200 calories per day and I just can't seem to lose weight. What's going on? Metabolic adaptation are the changes that lead to this. Now, the interesting thing about this is people think, okay, my metabolism is shot. The resting metabolic rate changes from even significant weight loss is not really that much. It's between maybe 5 and 50 calories off of predicted values. So if you're a person that starts at 200 pounds and you drop down to 150 pounds, yes, your metabolism is going to go down simply because you have 50 pounds of less metabolically active tissue. Even body fat is metabolically active. So we expect that drop. Once we account for that drop, people will say, I've got my friend, Deborah from the cul-de-sac, and she's 150 pounds, and now I'm 150 pounds, but she can eat a lot more than me. Resting metabolism is usually not the problem there, because we find that even when we have significant weight loss in play, it's half of a fun-sized Snickers bar daily. So that's not what's causing people to struggle. But metabolic adaptation does cause a struggle. It's just different from what we think. The two adaptations that come from this that are very significant are drops in non-resting energy expenditure and increased cravings. So your body upregulates your drive to find more food, and non-resting energy expenditure means all of the movement that you do, that's the energy burn that from the movement that you do, not at rest. So the NEAT, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, all the fidgeting that you do, all the walking that you do, all of the movements at work that you do, tends to plummet. And NEAT can be extremely influential. For an average person, it's between 500 and maybe 2,000 calories per day in those with agricultural jobs. And so if you're comparing yourself to a friend that seemingly can eat whatever she wants when you go out and doesn't seem to gain any weight, whereas if you look at an advertisement for a Reese's peanut butter cup, you gain 20 pounds, it's likely because she either moves a lot more or she's eating a lot less throughout the day. And so these metabolic adaptations that come into play are really important to understand, because it still always goes back to that energy balance part of the equation. Is the energy being burned enough? Is the energy intake, is the food intake too much for the body? So if we know that this metabolic adaptation is going to come into play while we're trying to lose weight, and it's the main cause of stalls, what do we do about this to really help people, both as a coach and as people that are listening to this? That's where you start to put some things into play that can give you some insight into what you're dealing with. This is where maybe you start to weigh food and track food. And I'm not saying everybody has to do this all the time. What I'm saying is it gives you some very real insight into what's going on in your body. And if you're experiencing a stall, it's almost a must for you to do to really identify what's going on. If things aren't broke, you don't mess with it. But when things do feel like they're off, you need to troubleshoot it. And this is a very important part of that journey. If you're eyeballing things, you guys can probably identify with this just as much as I can. The amount of peanut butter that I want on a spoon is almost criminal. And when you actually start to weigh, you're like, oh my God, that's how much I was eating at this period. So tracking becomes a really important thing. And I would tell people that are struggling, or when you have clients that are struggling, because we've got a lot of practitioners that are listening to this as well, have them track for 2 or 3 months. Go over the logs, verify that their entries are accurate, because that's a big issue that we have. Once we start to get that into play, we can identify whether or not NEAT is the problem, that exercise, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Is that a problem? And one of the best ways that you can do this, and I highly recommend that everybody do this, get a step counter, monitor your steps at the beginning of your fat loss journey. Figure out where they fall. We can't identify all of the movement that you have throughout the day. It's just not physically possible for a device to identify that. But steps are a good proxy. So use that. You will actually see metabolic adaptation come into play. You're going to see, as you lose weight, steps tend to go down, unless it's kept up because of a job. Like maybe if you're a nurse, you walk a lot and it's just, there's no way that you cannot walk. It's going to tend to go down. But that's good too, because that's another piece of information that you can use to prevent that stall. Oh, I started out at 6,000 steps per day. And now that I'm 25 pounds down, I'm at 4,000 steps per day. And if I wasn't watching this, I would be questioning, well, I'm eating the same things. Why am I not losing body fat? Because the movement, the calories burned, has been lowered. And so there's only 2 ways that you can adjust for that. You can either move more or you can eat less. And at some point, you don't want to continue eating less because you start to dig into your own health. You need micronutrients. You need the fiber for gut health and cancer prevention. You need protein. You need these things in your body if you really want to thrive. Because this isn't just about losing the weight for a season. This is about losing it and keeping it off and living a better life. So when we understand these underlying processes, it can make it a lot easier. And this is about as bland as you can be when you're talking about nutrition for people. They're just like, man, this is so boring. It's essentially numbers. Your body is a system and numbers are a big part of it. And so when you identify how you can adjust these numbers, it really makes your life a lot easier, because then you can figure out, okay, I'm not exactly where I want to be physically. Here are the things that I can do to adjust for that. I know resting metabolic rate goes down, but it's not really enough to cause me to stall out. The starvation mode isn't really a thing. We've had tons of low-calorie diet studies. We've had the Minnesota starvation experiment. We've had every study that has ever looked at a controlled situation shows the starvation mode isn't real. You cannot eat so little calories that you hold on to body fat. And the horrible example that everybody gives whenever we talk about this is, have you ever seen a prison camp with a random obese person? It doesn't happen. Your body needs to pull energy from somewhere. Your body needs a certain amount of energy to live. You can downregulate some processes a little bit, but that's that 50 calories. Even in the largest example that we know of, the Minnesota starvation experiment in the 50s, these people lost 25% of their total body mass in a few months. And the resting metabolic rate, how far off it was from the predicted value of their new weight, was only 100 calories. That's a single fun-size Snickers bar per day. Less than, actually. So I would say to anybody that says, oh, I'm eating too few calories to lose weight, no, that's not possible. And we see that in studies. Now, that's not to say you're lying. And I want that to be very distinct. We are not claiming that anybody's lying. It's just not due to what you think. It's either you're taking in more calories than you think. And when we look at this in the research, particularly in people that are obese, you would think that the more obese a person is, probably if they track, the more errors there are in tracking, right? If somebody is really good with tracking, they probably aren't dealing with the same type of issues. So these numbers are a little bit skewed because of that. But when we look at people that are overweight, they will typically have more calories by about 500 to 1,000 per day than what they believe. And people would think, how am I screwing up 1,000 calories per day? It's because you don't know what you don't know. You're not a registered dietitian. Nobody expects you to know these things.
Don't even I've seen that nutritionists are even off by a pretty large percentage. I forget the number when they track.
250 calories.
How many?
250.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And just an anecdote to share. I had a client yesterday. This just made me think, Alan, about how nice it is to bring calories, to just talk about it, because I feel like for so long we didn't. We were just eat clean, eat whole foods, you'll be fine. And that's not true for everybody. And I had this darling client yesterday, postmenopausal, has put on a lot of weight and explained her diet to me, was really doing a lovely job. But it is a lot of nuts, a lot of olive oil, a lot of beautiful foods, a lot of 2 avocados a day. And when I just said, okay, so calories do matter. And she said, oh, and she's a very intelligent woman. Mm-hmm. Oh, they do? I just thought I could, as long as I was eating healthy, I would be, but we don't talk about it enough.
So here's the thing. When you say, okay, it's time to eat healthy, the calories always matter, whether you count them or not. Mm-hmm. When you say, okay, it's time to eat healthy, and people make a shift and they start to move away from the standard American diet, which has a lot of fast food, when you start to eat more whole foods, one of the side effects of that is it will typically lower your daily calorie burden. Because when you start to eat more fruits and vegetables, they're very low calorie. When you start to eat more lean meats, it's much lower calorie than what you were eating before. And so they're like, I'm eating clean, so I'm losing weight. We can both say that energy balance is important because that's what guides weight loss and weight gain. 100%. There is no question about that. For people that follow my Instagram, I actually posted an entire thing with all the research on the carbohydrate insulin model. And the carbohydrate insulin model was a theory. It's been debunked. It's still pushed. It was a theory that things like insulin and carbs are to blame, and it's not the calories. That's not true. It's the calories. But understand that this is, when we talk about this, it's the fact that the calories guide weight loss or weight gain. Full stop, no question. That's, the research shows that without a doubt. That doesn't tell you what you gain, what you lose, or overall health. And I think that's where people that don't like that calories in, calories out idea get a little bit up in arms, because they're like, 100 calories of Pop-Tarts isn't the same thing as 100 calories of apples. You're 100% right. That doesn't mean that the 100 calories are different in major effects from like a fat loss standpoint. Like, you take 100 calories away, you're going to lose the same amount of weight. And there are studies showing this, whether you take it away from fats or whether you take it away from carbs. Protein's a little bit different because it's not as easily stored as adipose tissue, but you can basically change up the ratio of carbs to fats and you get the same results as long as calories and protein are equated. But the health outcomes are very different based on whether you're eating whole minimally processed foods, whether your body's going to run much more efficiently off of fruits and vegetables and lean beef and fish and those different types of things. So when you have that client that says, I'm eating clean, I don't know what's going on, assuming they're not significantly obese from eating clean, they're probably very healthy. They're probably just not where their physique is, they want it to be.
American College of Healthcare Sciences. Your journey in holistic nutrition starts here. Holistic nutrition is a pathway to lasting wellness. ACHS's evidence-based programs equip you to lead, educate, and make a meaningful impact in the lives of others. My Wellness Collaborative is an innovative online platform designed for holistic, integrative, and natural healthcare providers who want to expand their reach, elevate their expertise, and strengthen community, all without the barriers that traditionally limit growth. Through their provider directory, educational ecosystem, and collaborative tools, they make it simple for practitioners to be discovered by the right clients, connect with fellow professionals, and access reputable wellness brands with confidence.
Yeah, and I think it's much easier to eat whole minimally processed foods to achieve a healthy body composition and maintain it, because calorie for calorie, those foods are more satiating, and the carby stuff, the yummy stuff, you tend to want more of that. So I think it makes it easier to stick mostly to whole minimally processed foods.
Does.
Yeah.
It absolutely, I'm 100% in agreement with you there. And a lot of it's just because of food volume.
Yes.
And because of the types of nutrients that you're pulling in. You pull in a bunch of protein and fiber from foods. And this is always something that I really have to stress whenever I'm talking to clients or new coaches. When you are shooting for a fiber target, it should always be from foods, not like you're pulling in a Metamucil. And that's one of the big mistakes that I see people make. And I think that it's a big mistake because people will look at it and they'll say, okay, Alan says that fiber is important, and I don't really get a whole lot of fiber from my diet, so I'm just going to use like psyllium husk or Metamucil or something like that. That's not what we're trying to achieve. The reason that doesn't really work the way that it is supposed to work is because just like steps are a proxy for need, fiber is a proxy for proper micronutrient intake in a diet. The foods that provide significant amounts of fiber also tend to be very micronutrient rich. And skipping out on high fiber foods in exchange for fiber supplements seems to miss this point. So when you're talking about, whole minimally processed foods tends to make this a lot easier. It certainly does. And one of the reasons is because these foods take longer to digest. They have a lot more nutrients. They make you feel better. They make you sleep better. They make your skin better. They make your hair better. All these things that are people that are going for, this stuff really helps. And I know that it's funny that a bald guy is saying it makes your hair better, but we've got these things that really help out in life, and we need to take advantage of them. And I promise people that if you're used to the standard diets when you first switch over to these whole minimally processed food diets, you're going to feel like it's a little bit bland. But the longer that you do it, the more that your palate changes. It takes time and it takes consistency. And that's okay. It's going to get better. You will learn to use spices, herbs, low-calorie condiments, all of these different types of things to make your life easier, to make it more enjoyable. You can make whole minimally processed meals taste very good. It takes a little bit of practice. But you can do it. And the more that you do it, the more it really starts to change. You start to feel better. You start to see the results. It becomes a little bit addictive. But this is one of those good things that we can get you hooked on.
A good addiction. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little too addicted to the whole process too. So maybe I need to start weighing mine a little bit more. But
Well, it's
makes
interesting.
it does make me want to circle back though, Alan, to something you mentioned with calories. And we're noting here that calories matter and we have to think about that, which people aren't wanting to do anymore, but it's a fact.
Yep.
Is there an issue with extreme calorie restriction when we're looking at overall health and longevity of being able to maintain a weight loss? Is there a minimum that you recommend, or is it okay to go down to 500 calories a day until you get to your weight loss goals? Like what's your stance on?
So when I said that you can't go too low that you can't lose weight, that's 100% true. But at the same time, that I am also not saying go as low as you possibly can go, because there's certainly going to be health and physique problems that come from that. And one of the things that I really love seeing these days is, particularly for women, as we've been moving along in the decades, building lean muscle and understanding the benefits of lean muscle has come into the forefront of society. And you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like in the last 5 years, women have really taken this on and said, I get it. I want this. Because in decades past, it would be rare to see women lifting the heavy weights with the men and all that kind of stuff. And I think that these days it's 50-50, if not women more, because women tend to be, I'm going to paint with broad strokes here, but I can tell you that this is really funny because they actually teach you this in med school. Women are more conscientious about their health. Women are better at following doctors' directions. They are better at taking care of themselves before issues happen. And I think that now that women are starting to buy into the idea of building lean muscle and looking athletic and living a better, longer life, and we've had this big push with like menopause health and getting through menopause, not going into osteoporosis, not going into sarcopenia. And particularly if you're in those transitions, when you're more prone to these issues, dropping your calories too low can wreak havoc on anybody, but women in particular at that time period. So when we're talking about how low can you go, what you would do as a coach is you would be watching rate of loss week to week. In the obese, you can lose, and this is not any individual week, this is the trends that we see over time. In the obese, losing about 1 to 2 pounds a week is about right. Maybe more in the beginning. When you first start, you can't really tell, because if you just change from a standard American diet to a more whole foods diet, you flush out water, you flush out muscle glycogen, especially if you're going low carb, so you'll drop weight really quickly. But this is what we start to see over time. Obese, about 2 pounds. Normal weight, maybe a little bit overweight, 1 pound or so. The leaner that you get, you might be 0.25 to 0.5 pounds per week as an average. And I bring this up because there are people that when they start out, they're seeing those 2-3 pound drops every 2 weeks or slightly more. And they're like, okay, good. And then it slows, because the less body fat that you have, the less you have to lose. Also, as you get smaller, as we talked about earlier, your calorie requirements go down. There's less of you. So that means if you're starting out at 2,000 calories and now all of a sudden your maintenance calories are 1,500, you've just lost 25% of your daily calories. That means if you have that exact same Snickers bar at now than at 2,000 calories, it is proportionately more of your daily intake. So there's less room to screw around and then not see it come out in the results. And that's okay. You can make that choice to have that Snickers bar at any point, but then the expectations are, okay, I'll probably hold steady on my weight during this period. As you get leaner and leaner, those same calories will affect you more because they are proportionally a larger portion of your daily intake. So first, when you're talking about, can we go too low? One, look at these rates of loss and see if you fall within those rates over extended periods. Don't look at just 1 week, because water flux can happen and that can throw this off. We look at extended periods. For women, particularly women of menstruation age, usually 4-week periods are pretty good, because otherwise you're looking at yourself at a different point in your cycle. And you can certainly hold water at one point versus another, so the scale doesn't really tell you the whole story. When we're looking at, okay, how do I set up my nutrition? And you want to lose weight optimally without causing these problems that you were alluding to. This is a very circuitous way for me to get to this, but I wanted to set all that up so people would understand this point. When you are setting up your nutrition, and we look at the research, a typical fat loss point for your calories that will minimize or prevent loss of lean muscle is anywhere between 250 and 500 calories below maintenance per day. So can you go too low? Yes. The lower that you go, the more of a chance you could lose lean muscle, the more of a chance that you probably aren't going to build lean muscle. When certain people, genetics, the way that they train, where their protein is set, all of those different things, have the ability to potentially body recomp, which means build some lean muscle and lose body fat at the same time. But the deeper that you go into that deficit, the less of a chance you'll have to do that. And that cutoff at about 500 seems to be the point where if you go beyond that, you're going to be really happy that the scale's dropping quickly, but a lot of that drop is going to be you losing lean muscle. So do we really want to chase the scale and set ourselves up for less health long term? Because muscle provides so many benefits. It's injury resistance. It is mobility and quality of life. It is longer years to your life. It is a metabolic sink. When you take in carbs, particularly if you lift regularly, this is a cool thing for women that are getting into lifting for the first time. When you start lifting, it primes your skeletal muscles that you're using to say, ooh, I'm being used. I need to store more energy than I normally do. Cool. If you have that extra pizza, more of that glucose goes into the skeletal muscles instead of being stored in adipose tissue. It's stored in fat. So it acts as a metabolic sink. It is something that can protect you, can give you some of that flexibility in your daily life that you've always been looking for. And this conversation of how do we lose the body fat and maintain the lean muscle mass is extremely important, because we want to have the best quality of life. And this is one of the ways that Deborah from the cul-de-sac is able to have her pizza when you struggle with it. Maybe she has 150 pounds, but a lot more muscle in that 150 pounds than what you have. And maybe it's because she spent some of that time being a little bit more patient, not chasing okay, I need to get to that Kate Moss skinny look from the 90s, not chasing that number on the scale, and focusing on the benefits that this health journey provides. And there's a lot of points to consider when you're setting it up for yourself. And you're going to have to find that balance to where, okay, what is best for me mentally and emotionally right now? What is best for me with my health? And particularly women, and you can disagree with me if you would like on this point, because I have not lived this, but this has been my experience working with, I predominantly work with 40-year-old women and older as my main group of clients. One of the things that I've seen is women have really bought into that athletic toned look. They're like, I want the peach booty. I don't want the 1990s crack model booty. You really want the health, and that buy-in is there mentally. The problem is society has beaten people down into thinking that the scale is their sign of success, because you don't spend 50, 60 years of life being told thinner is better and then immediately just change. So our path to get to where we want to be, even though we accept that we want to be healthy and build this lean muscle and be active, we're still trying to get there in the old ways, mentally, subconsciously. And if we hold steady for 4, 6, 8 weeks on the scale, that might be exactly what you need. It might be optimal to see that. And I'm trying to save some of the coaches that are listening to this. They can play this for their clients. Your coach might be saying, hey, you've shown me example physiques that you want. You've told me what you want. I know that the way to get you there is not to chase the scale dropping. I know it, if anything, it might be having the scale go up. You might find along this journey that you feel like you look worse before you look better. Because if you start adding some calories in, if you start lifting, you might feel a little bit fluffy at times when your ultimate goal is to be leaner, but maybe it makes more sense to build muscle now and then lose a little bit of that body fat later. Maybe your pants size will go up because I deal with this all the time where I'll have a person come to me and they'll say, hey, I want to build a bigger booty. And then we're like, okay, cool. And we start doing it. And they're like, my pant size is going up. I'm like, I don't want my pant size to go up. I'm like, where is that booty going to go? It's got to go somewhere. And so just to save some of the coaches and the RDs and the naturopathic doctors that are dealing with the mental and emotional aspect, because that's really what coaches deal with. After a few years, you really get your practices down well and you know what works, and it works really well for people. And it is managing the mental and emotional aspect that's the challenging part when you're working with people. And for the clients that are listening to this, really take to heart that sometimes maybe the reason that you've been on the diet roller coaster is because the methods that you have used paint you into a corner. You can't just continue chasing a calorie deficit for the rest of your life. You can't live life in a calorie deficit. And if we want to break free of that, spending some time, particularly if you have never lifted weights before, at maintenance or above calorie levels is probably a very beneficial thing for you. If obesity is in place, sure, lose body fat. Obesity, having a lot of body fat, is metabolically protective. You can both lose body fat and gain muscle really well at the same rate. Once you're outside of obesity, once you're outside of that first year of training where you have those newbie gains, you start to have to plan these nutrition and training cycles a little bit more distinctly. When you're first lifting weights, that first year, maybe year and a half if you're lucky, you'll gain lean muscle like nothing else. And then it stops and it slows and then it's very small. And you really have to dial in the way that you are consistent and adherent, and it takes a little bit more effort. But yeah, stay the course and realize that you can't spend your entire life in a calorie deficit. As much as I know that we believe that's probably the way to get there, because in our minds we're like, I just want to be more toned. But being more toned includes having significant amounts of lean muscle. That's what you're showing off when you're toned. If you don't do that stage, you look gaunt. Nobody wants to be gaunt, but that's where we're ultimately going if all we're trying to do is lose weight on the scale with no thought of, okay, what else is going on in my situation?
Yeah, that's so well said. And we talked a lot about calories. Can we just take a minute or two, because you touched on this during our conversation, on the importance of macronutrients? So for the listener, that would be protein, fat, carbohydrate. So can you talk to us, like, what are your thoughts around how someone should plan those macronutrients in their weight loss journey and so forth?
Sure. So there's a way that I would plan everybody's nutrition, regardless of who you are. One, set a calorie target first. Give yourself plus or minus 50, because like we talked about, there's going to be errors in calorie tracking for a whole variety of reasons that would take an entire show to explain. There's going to be variance. Give yourself a little bit of a range. It'll make you feel better. Then you don't have to say, oh, I've got to hit 1900 calories exactly. No, that's dumb. Hit 1850 to 1950. Your life becomes a lot easier. Once you have your calorie targets, then it's time to start setting macros if you've decided that you want to start tracking macros and really give yourself the best chance to move as efficiently and productively as possible. First, set a protein target. I'm smiling because I'm thinking, how do I want to address this? There's a big recommendation out there where people will say, do 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. I can't say that they're wrong. I would say I recommend against that. If a good coach says that, I know a lot of good coaches that do. I know a lot of good RDs that do. They're not wrong, but I would be hesitant to recommend that. And I'm hesitant to recommend that because you don't know what your ideal body weight is. Body weight doesn't matter. What if you look better at 155 pounds than 150 pounds? Do you say, okay, I look better, but now I'm going to lose this muscle that I built because I need to be 150 pounds? No, you wouldn't say that. So we don't know what our ideal body weight is. Typically, when you ask a person, why did you choose that weight? They're like, I weighed that in college. And it's, do you want to look better and feel better than you did in college? Or is college like literally it? And you're in a different position than you are in college. So it's not the same situation. So Outside of people with obesity, we can set protein targets, if you want to be optimal, anywhere between about 0.72 and 1.5 grams per pound of current body weight. That's a big range. And so people will say, then how do I do it? You could do a pound. That's perfectly fine. At least try to do 0.72. That's where we see you're now in that golden range. You're in that bell curve of really good benefits. So shoot for that as your base.
So you would take your body weight times it by 0.72.
Yep.
Got
and
it.
then do that many grams per pound of body weight daily.
Got it.
That is your base. You can certainly go above. If you prefer, I like eating fish. I want some more of that. Okay, that's good. That's fine. The reason that there's a range is because your body requires different amounts to function optimally depending on what you're doing. If you are older, maybe if you're older than 60, you have a little bit of anabolic resistance in play. Having a little bit more protein can actually counterbalance some of that. So maybe we don't stop at 0.72. That's something that we don't really hear a whole lot, but this is what research shows. If you're in a cut, the deeper in a cut you go, likely you should probably go up a little bit more in protein. For an average person, I would say go up to that 1 gram per pound of body weight. If you want to step on a bodybuilding stage or a physique stage, then you start to go above that. For most people, that's not really relevant, but that's why we have these wider ranges. If you have significantly more lean muscle, you might be above that 1 gram per pound of body weight.
Does it matter if you're, no matter what level of obesity, or is there any?
So this, remember I said this is in people that are not obese.
Okay.
I'll get to obesity in a second. I just want to make sure that everybody else has a good answer first.
Gotcha.
So between that 0.72 and that 1.5, 1.5 is really high for most people. Honestly, I don't use that for literally anybody except for my people that are stepping foot on stage, or for people that are doing hey, Alan, it's 6 weeks out or 4 weeks out from my wedding and I screwed up. I have not done anything. And I'm like, all right, we're going to drop those calories super low. We're going to up your protein, because upping the protein, people don't really understand that the reason that we get higher amounts of protein is because it's muscle sparing. And so when you have significant calorie deficits, higher protein intake can help counterbalance that and prevent you from pulling from your skeletal muscle stores that you've been working so hard to attain. So outside of those ranges, we don't typically go that high. If you're obese, I would recommend doing 1 gram of protein daily per centimeter of body height. That's a good way to do it. Now, you'll talk with a lot of coaches or a lot of professionals, researchers in particular, that'll say, oh, the most accurate way is to do it per gram of lean mass that you have in your body. Too complicated. Just do 0.72, 0.8, move on with life. You're completely fine. Don't do ideal body weight. I just don't like it because it sets up some problems. It's improper goal setting, for one. And that's one of the things when we talk about being sustainable, we want to prevent people from setting improper goals. You can't control how much weight you lose. You can't control where you're going to look your best. There are 2 types of goals: outcome-based goals and habit-based goals. Outcome-based goals you have no control over. You can't control if you lose 20 pounds in 6 months. You can't control if you bench press 50 more pounds in 3 months. You can't control any of those things. The scale's going to do what the scale does. You can control your habits and your routines. So rather than setting an ideal weight, which is unproductive because only 1 of 2 things are going to happen. Either you reach that weight and then you lose the driving force that you had to motivate you, and you potentially fall off. And this is one of the reasons that we see the recidivism rates that we do in weight loss. Or you don't reach that weight and you feel like a failure. Either way, you're increasing your chances for really having some problems. So rather than goal setting with outcomes, why don't we do habit-based goal setting? Things that you can largely control. How many steps are you going to get daily? How many times are you going to go to the gym this week? How consistent and adherent are you going to be with your diet? Can you eat a damn fruit or vegetable every day? These are the things. How much water are you drinking? Roughly how many hours of sleep are you getting? Assuming you don't have a newborn kid, you can control that to a decent extent. Set these things as your goals, and you are going to be able to sustain this long term without having these severe hindrances. And I know that people love goal weights. It's literally the most favorite thing for people that do not succeed long term. And I really want to put it that way because the people that fight me so much on I need to have a goal weight are the people that have struggled with losing weight for their entire lives. The people that succeed, they don't fight you on that much. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they succeed. So start thinking about this a little bit differently. We've got 2 other macronutrients. Once you've set your protein targets, set your fat minimums. You can certainly go above, but you need a minimum because you don't want to get less than this on a daily basis. Outside of the obese, 0.3 grams per pound of body weight. That will assure things like hormone health, skin, hair, nails, micronutrient absorption. You need it to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. You cannot go so low that you're going to put yourself in like amenorrhea, all of these other issues, super low testosterone for men, those problems. Once you've set that fat minimum, you can distribute the rest of your calories within that first thing that we did, that calorie goal for the day. You can distribute the rest of your calories to carbs, protein, fats, as you would like. Having said that, there are 3 things that are common habits that those who lose the weight and keep it off all have in common when we look at the research. They don't eat much fast food, which means they're cooking for themselves. They have a low food variety in their daily day. Now, this can scare the crap out of people. Low food variety means if you have breakfast, lunch, dinner, come up with 2, 3, 4 options for each meal and cycle those. Chicken on a salad, fruit, and protein like yogurt as a snack. Come up with multiple options for each main meal and then 2 or 3 high protein or high fiber snacks. Make those your base every day. And this allows you to meal prep. Every week, I'm going to have some chicken breast. I'm going to have some pork tenderloin. I'm going to have rice. I'm going to have potatoes. Cool. You can do an entire week's worth of rice in a crock pot in 16 minutes. You can meal prep these things. Having that lower food variety doesn't mean that you can't have some variety. You change things up through the condiments that you use, through the spices, through the herbs. Change things up that way. It'll give you some stability in your weekly choices, which will lower your decision fatigue. Because if you have the choice of anything in the world, it causes problems. 1, it takes more effort to decide what you're going to eat. 2, it causes something called the buffet effect. The buffet effect is if you have unlimited choices and you're constantly changing your foods, your cravings drastically ramp up. And then you don't stick to these macros that we've set. And then 3, the third thing that is very common among people that lose the weight and keep it off, they tend to be higher carb rather than higher fat. This is not a prescription. I prefer higher fat than higher carb. I believe the reason that we see this, it's about 70-30. 70% of people do better on higher carb, lower fat to cut their calories. The inverse for the 30%. I believe that the reason that we see this is because when you have higher carb, it allows you to have more fruits and veggies in your diet. Fats are not very satiating. They're very energy dense. They're 9 calories per gram, whereas carbs are 4 calories per gram, or if you're in fiber, it's either 0 or 2.2, depending on if it's soluble or insoluble. But the people that have an allowance for more carbs can eat more fruits and vegetables. Fights hunger, makes you feel better, a lot more micronutrients.
More volume?
Yeah, it just tends to work better. It's not a prescription for everybody, but I'm just saying these are the 3 things that we see in common when we look at people that lose the weight and keep it off. Consider it for yourself and then make adjustments based off of your personal preference and how you're reacting. If you're telling me, Alan, I really like more fat, so I want to have more cheese, I want to have more whatever. Okay, cool. But Alan, I'm super hungry. Maybe you need to choose some more fruits and veggies. You can make that balance to where you find it good for you. You're just going to have to deal with those choices if you choose to have the more calorie-dense foods. So there are ways to set this up to support yourself. There's that give and take, no matter what you choose. But you're the one in the driver's seat. And as long as you understand the pros and cons, you can make those choices to best fit your life. And then the last thing that I would consider when you're tracking foods, I tell my clients and in the information that I put out online, I recommend anywhere between 5 to 20% of your daily calories be discretionary calories, which means you can choose anywhere from 5 to 20% of your daily calorie intake to put towards any food you want. It can be chocolate. It can be chips. There are only two exceptions that I would put in play here. One, it shouldn't be a trigger food. If you say, hey, look, I'm going to put 100 calories per day and I'm going to eat chocolate. Great. If you've planned that, it allows you to have it. It shows you foods aren't good or bad. It allows you to enjoy it without any guilt. But if that 100 calories becomes 300 calories every day, it's not serving its purpose. And if you set those rules and you're consistently having that issue, you can be an adult and you can be honest with yourself and say, hey, this is not working for me. But that's good because then it's your choice. It's not a coach. It's not somebody else putting this rule on you, making you feel restricted. It is a choice that you make. So this is really good for coaches to start to incorporate because it allows people to get some of those a little bit more processed foods, to realize that if the large majority of our diet is coming from whole minimally processed foods, it's probably going to be promoting health, and having some of these more indulgent foods in a daily diet can allow that to be sustainable, because the reality is the average person is not going to just be eating fruits and vegetables and fish for every meal, for every choice. And the restrictive feeling can be more problematic. It can backfire on us. So you want to give people the ability to pull in some of these foods within reason, within bumpers. And then all of a sudden it becomes sustainable. Then all of a sudden life becomes a lot easier. And you can start to move forward in a productive manner. Now there's a large range there, 5 to 20%. Because remember, as we become smaller, we have less room for error. So really small people might need to be on the smaller end of that, the 5% end. Larger people like me, I'm 235 pounds. I can probably be at 20% and hold steady just fine. If you want predictable, faster results, you want to be at the lower percentage range. If you're comfortable with where you are, if you want more social experiences, you can be at the higher percentage of that range. But you want to give yourself that range, whether you're trying to lose body fat, whether you're trying to maintain, whether you're trying to do whatever you're trying to do. You want to set those bumpers because it allows you to have these foods, to realize there's no good or bad dichotomy. There's more nutritious and less nutritious. This allows you to get some of those less nutritious without the guilt. And it gives you that permission to do it. So it establishes a good relationship with food. It prevents the restrictive mindset. A lot of reasons to be able to bring this in. And I found that over time, it has been extremely beneficial for people.
Like, really makes it practical, I think, and doable for all of us on an everyday basis.
Yeah.
Then we're not looking at it's such a diet. It's more of developing a lifestyle that's maintainable.
And especially if you are setting up a small variety of different meals that you're going to have per day, and you're like, okay, there's routine here. And that's not to say that you can't change those up from time to time, but for extended periods of time, you're going to want to stick to similar patterns of eating to get used to it. This breaks that up a bit. It allows you to have some room for some other things. And one of the ways that I've seen my clients use this is every winter, I'll get a message from somebody and they're like, you know what? I don't typically eat things like chilies or have them on my plan. Can we start to pull these in? And I'll be like, I call it a free calorie allotment, the discretionary calories. I say, use your free calorie allotment. You've got ground beef on plan. You've got some cheese on plan. You've got some of these other things. The only things that we don't have in play are maybe some beans and some of these other things. Why don't you pull some of those calories from that and just have one less square of chocolate that day, and then you can do it. You don't ever have to ask me any questions, and you can move on with your life. It gives your client autonomy to be able to do their own things. And I think that this is extremely important for the coaches and doctors listening to this, because you want your client to have as much autonomy as possible, because when they have choices, it's a lot easier to be sustainable.
Super practical, helpful information. Before I know we're going to need to wrap up here. We could talk all day.
How many
Oh my
questions
God,
did
we were talking about that? Yeah, there's a lot to cover. Are there any other myths that you hear either like on social media or anything else, just a couple that you just want to debunk quickly before we start to wrap up?
I'm thinking, how dramatic do we want to be? For you guys were saying some of the big things that were on your mind or on your clients' minds was the menopause, the transition, that different type of thing. I want people to realize that over the past couple of years, women's fitness and menopause related fitness and health has become a really big thing. There are a lot of online doctors, a lot of online influencers that are attempting to take advantage of people because, like we said earlier, women are more conscientious about their health. When you get people that are conscientious about their health, they're more willing to spend money on it. And when you take something as scary as the menopause transition, it can be essentially the perfect prey for somebody that is trying to take advantage of other people. And we're seeing this a lot. And for anybody that's followed my work, I've worked with a lot of the top OBGYNs and menopause doctors in the space. And one of the things that we lament is that studies have been misconstrued to women to essentially sell them things like weight vests and supplements and all of these things that aren't necessarily giving the benefits that are being claimed. And just like when I was talking about how habits are the number one thing to be able to adjust, it's not necessarily genetics that are really holding you back, which is a good thing. Menopause itself is also not dooming you. Now, it can be very difficult to hear this from a male. And so I want to point out that studies do back this up, and it can be misconstrued with the way that they're being presented. As a person, if I were trying to trick people and sell them my menopause fitness program, my menopause nutrition, my menopause supplements, I could take studies and I could word them in a way that would make it seem like you need to. The reality is menopause does not change nutrition protocols. It does not change training protocols. You do the same things before and after. For some women, they're saying, I didn't lift weights before. You probably should have been lifting weights before. That's just good for anybody of any age. But even when we look at the seminal studies that look at these types of things, like the SWAN study, menopause influencers have looked at that and they've said, hey, this looks at thousands of women over the menopause transition. And when we look at this, the amount of fat that they gain doubles, the amount of lean muscle that they lose doubles during this transition. It is havoc on a woman's body. I can say that and be completely honest. That's exactly what the data shows, that it doubles. However, if I want to give you an honest reaction to it, I would say, hey, this looks over all of the years of the menopause transition. And for the entire transition, the women only gained 3.5 pounds of fat. They only lost 0.45 pounds of lean muscle. And that doesn't even account for age-related changes. With age-related changes, it's half of those. You gain less than 2 pounds of body fat. You lost less than half of a pound of lean muscle. That's over all the years of menopause. When I put it that way, does it sound doom and gloom?
You're my new favorite person. That's what
Now, here's the other thing to consider. This study looked at thousands of women. The average woman, again, this sounds terrible coming from a man, but you guys can you can call me out if I'm wrong here. The average woman, particularly in these studies that were done a few years ago, that were looking at women through the menopause transition, so 40 and older, right? We start to see the beginnings at about 40 and then older. These women, I would argue, are typically not your average gym rat. Just historically, that's not been where it has been. Maybe in 20 years, the girls that were growing up that were 20 years old and really got into lifting, like we'll see a much higher population that are in that. So we can assume that these women that lost less than half a pound of muscle and gained less than, 3.5 divided by 2, 1.75 pounds of body fat that they gained. These are women that don't even regularly go to the gym. They're not women that are used to really tracking their nutrition. Most people don't track their nutrition. They don't exercise. So we have a population of people that the experience is very different. You are having hot flashes. You can't sleep you're super irritable. Your memory is taking hits. There's a lot of vasomotor symptoms that are very real. So when people say, yeah, everything felt different to me, they are 100% on point. When we look at the data of these women, they're getting 40% less protein than what they were before. And these women were not eating protein before. They're getting 40% less protein. They're getting 50% less fiber. They're getting a lot more saturated fat in ratio to the other fats because of the menopause transition. Why is that? It's because life has become harder. Things hurt. Your joints ache. You can't sleep. Everything sucks. And so nutrition is taking hits. You're moving less because you're tired because you didn't sleep the night before. You're burning less calories. This goes back to everything that we talked about in the beginning. Energy balance is in play. You're moving less. You're eating worse. And every time I talk about this, people are like, I know that this is a problem. My Dr. X, who was on Oprah, said that women's resting metabolic rates drop during menopause. No, they do not. I know the study that person shows. The title of the study says, women's metabolic rates drop during menopause. You read the study, you go into it. In the study itself, it says, we saw a drop in metabolic rate at night for these women, but it was so small, it was not statistically significant, and there was no change in BMI. But people do not get past the study title. And they immediately freak out.
I am so happy that you shared this, not just as a postmenopausal woman, but just in general for our audience. It's such an inspiring message. It's so hopeful, and it's such a great way to end the show. It's wonderful.
Well, I want to point this out. When people are using these studies in this manner, what they're trying to do is they're trying to prey on you and on your emotions. What they're really doing is they're stealing agency. They're stealing women's agency. I can't do anything about this. This is my hormones. You are not reduced to your hormones. If it was your hormones, going on estrogen replacement therapy would replace muscle. It doesn't. It sure can make you feel better, especially if your joints are hurting. So you can get on estrogen replacement therapy, or menopause replacement therapy is the term that we like to use these days. 100% get on that if it can treat your symptoms. It's not going to be the big difference between you losing muscle or gaining muscle. Your nutrition and your training will be. And even when we look at the biggest studies that look at things like metabolism, Ponzer 2021 did a study on thousands of people across age ranges, including thousands of women across menopause. You don't need a study to say menopause in the title to show you what's happening in menopause. They looked at thousands of women. They found, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, from age 20 to 60, your resting metabolism stays the same, does not change, as long as you take into account variances in things like lean muscle mass. If you lose a bunch of lean muscle, you're going to burn less calories because you have less lean muscle. If you keep lifting, you will maintain that. After the age of 60, whether you're a man or a woman, and past 60, this is how you can tell that this is relevant to menopause. I would be very doubtful that the majority of women are going into menopause beyond 60. The stats show that's not true. I'm just pointing out how ludicrous it is to say we don't have any data in these women. We've got a lot of data. You got to look in different spots. The study doesn't have to say menopause. Thousands of women from 40 to 60 show no drop in resting metabolic rate. We do see drops in that non-resting energy expenditure, that exact thing we talked about in metabolic adaptation. The NEAT drops for women in menopause because you feel like crap. And it's going to drop whether you realize it or not. So when women say, I'm doing everything the same, you're going to the gym maybe in the same way. You're doing the same walks that you used to do. But for the rest of the day, you're sitting a lot more. You just don't realize it. And all of the data points towards this. And if we look at the large majority of women and we only see these 1.75 pounds of body fat gain, if we only see 0.25 pounds of muscle loss over all of the years of the menopause transition, when we looked at it in this study, it was almost 4 years for the people that they looked at. And that's what they saw. That's not insurmountable in a population of women that aren't weight training and aren't monitoring their nutrition. You can do this.
Yeah, you can do this. I mean, it's so inspiring. I know. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I know people are going to want to follow you, Alan. So tell us all the ways that we can follow you.
Sure. You can head on over to my website at mauiathletics.com. At the bottom of the page, there are all my social media links. Or you can look me up on Instagram at Dr. Allan Bacon. Just make sure you spell my first name right, Allan.
Go follow Alan if you aren't already. Thank you for sharing your time. We really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me on. I love doing it.
Yeah, we'll have to do a round two. And thank you, everybody out there, for joining us. We always appreciate it. Until next time, be well.
This podcast was brought to you in part by American College of Healthcare Sciences and My Wellness Collaborative. Visit achs.edu to start your holistic health education journey today. Looking for a collaborative space to find a holistic health practitioner? Visit mywellnesscollaborative.com to learn more. Don't miss a beat. Find other episodes and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or check us out on your favorite streaming app. Now available on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and more. You can also visit nanp.org for more information. Looking for a board-certified holistic nutrition professional to support you on your health journey? Go to nanp.org to get started today. Membership in the NANP provides you with a competitive advantage. Whether you're a current practitioner or a student, we want you to become an active, informed leader of the holistic nutrition community and join our association today. When you're ready to go a step further, you can boost your credibility by becoming board certified in holistic nutrition. Visit nanp.org today to apply. The information on the NANP podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or legal advice. The NANP is not liable or responsible for any harm, damage, or illness arising from the use of the information contained herein. By listening to the information on this podcast, you agree to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the NANP and all agents. Copyright NANP, all rights reserved. Until next time, stay nourished.